everybody, it's Colette Baron-Reid. Welcome to the Universal Energy Forecast for this week, June 29th. Thank you guys for being so kind. I know we were gone for a month. I didn't expect there would be so many emails. I actually didn't realize so many of you watched this, so I'm very excited to be back, and I promise there won't be such a big lull again. Anyway, this is going to be a very interesting week this week. First card, we're using the Wisdom of Avalon Oracle deck to describe to us what it is that we're going to be working with in terms of energy. So the first card is restriction. So what does restriction mean? So it could mean our limiting beliefs. What is it that we outpicture into the world? What do we see external to our internal world that reflects back as a restricted access, for example? So what do our beliefs tell us about how we view the world and how that speaks back to us? And we're noticing that more and more too recently with all the unrest everywhere, and we're starting to see how even cultural expectations are restricted in some ways. So we want you to look at what is your personal restriction and how do you get around that? Because the next card is the dragon. You do have the power to overcome your restrictions. My husband always says, there's always a solution. When I get, we don't have internet at the new farm. He's like, there's always a solution. So look at the restriction and ask, what's the solution for this? Do we surrender to it as it is? How do we find the solution to our restriction? If it's about a limiting belief, how do we choose to view things differently so that the results that we see outpictured in the world come back to us with a greater clarity and freedom? That's a big one. So, for example, conformity is one. When are you afraid to be totally yourself? This is about authenticity as well. So that's how we start the week. So that's going to be a theme for all of us all week long. And the second card is dragon. The dragon is about power and strength. And now it doesn't mean the strength of personal will as much as it means the power and strength to transform when the will, the human will, the small self's will is in alignment with the will of the soul. And the soul, of course, is the active personal element of the divine. So when you have these two things integrated, we realize that we face our shadow. And by the way, I did these cards once before and I actually reshuffled them, which I always tell people not to do. And I had gotten a very, very similar reading and I thought, I was just talking about something because it was reflecting what I was talking about. So it was very interesting to see how these things came up again, because in the last time I shuffled them, I got the goblin. And the goblin is about looking at not only the restrictions, but our sense of woundedness and how that applies to our behavior, etc. So I wanted to add that in because it really does make sense. And the dragon being all about the integration of larger will with the smaller will, instead of just ramming down, I want what I want when I want it. That can't work. It's not going to work. It's not working for anybody. It doesn't work now. It's not going to work in the future. So it's understanding the right use of power, the right use of intellect, and how we move forward around these restrictions. Fire Fairy is about creative optimism. So the Fire Fairy card always relates to creativity. So there's always a creative solution, again, like we said earlier, but also that inspiration. So when we are infused with spirit, it, again, does not come from the small self, the egoic mind. It comes from the higher self. So this is really about being invited into a higher aspect of ourselves this week when we're faced with things that we don't particularly like. Now, the Merlin card is what we end with, which is all about alchemy. We have all the parts to turn iron ore into gold. So regardless of whether or not you've run up against a restriction, either internally by your belief system or externally by something that you're not getting, what this card indicates is that anything can be repurposed. So if we look at the card that represents, like the goblin, which I didn't put in, the idea that there's a wounded self, well, how can that wounded self actually be turned around? How do we then turn perfectionism into something that's positive? So when do we see fear turning it into its opposite, for example? Instead of false evidence appearing real, how can we act in faith? So this card also reminds us that the things that on their own are not helpful, when you add them together and you transform them with faith, knowing that there is a higher purpose to all things, connecting to spirit, amazing things can happen. And that's what alchemy is. It's about bringing all the parts together, integrating them so that you come out whole and better than before at the end of it. So looks to me like we're going to have quite a week. Thank you so much for listening. So if you like this video, subscribe to my channel and share it with your friends. See you next week.
Traveling down the road, I didn't know that I was lost. I had tried too many shortcuts, and the cost left my heart broken. So I had it closed forever.